Karen brought 4 ex-husbands as witnesses, but what Judge Judy uncovered in all of them was unexpected. Judge Judith Scheindlin, known to millions simply as Judge Judy, had seen it all. 25 years on the bench, over 12,000 cases, and a reputation sharper than a prosecutor's closing argument. She could spot a liar from across the courtroom, smell a scam before the plaintiff finished their opening statement, and dismantle a con artist's story with 3 questions and a raised eyebrow. Her courtroom wasn't just a place where small claims were settled. It was where truth went to war with deception, and truth always won. But on a humid Tuesday morning in Studio City, a case walked through her doors that would test even her legendary instincts. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The bailiff announced the case with his usual professional monotone. Miller versus Henderson. Plaintiff seeks $5,000 for breach of contract and emotional distress. Standard stuff. Judge Judy glanced at her notes, ready for another open and shut case of he said, she said. Then the bailiff added something that made her pause mid-sip of her coffee. Your Honor, the plaintiff has brought 4 witnesses, all ex-husbands. Judge Judy's pen stopped moving. Her eyes, sharp as broken glass, lifted from the papers. 4 ex-husbands. In 25 years, she'd seen desperate plaintiffs bring mothers, neighbors, co-workers, even the occasional priest. But 4 ex-husbands? That wasn't desperation. That was either the worst luck in matrimonial history or something far more calculated. The camera panned to the gallery where 4 men sat in a row, each one looking like they'd rather be getting a root canal. They weren't sitting together, not really. There was space between them, the kind of deliberate distance that screamed discomfort. Ex-husband number 1 fidgeted with his watch. Ex-husband number 2 stared at his phone like it might offer an escape route. Ex-husband number 3 had his arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes anywhere but on the woman at the plaintiff's table. And ex-husband number 4, the oldest of the bunch, looked tired, deeply tired, like a man who'd been carrying a heavy secret for far too long. Judge Judy's internal radar, honed by decades of cutting through nonsense, started pinging. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled, studying the scene with the intensity of a chess master spotting a trap 3 moves ahead. When something doesn't make sense, it's usually because someone's lying, and this made no sense at all. Why would 4 men, all divorced from the same woman, all show up to vouch for her character? Divorce isn't usually the foundation of lifelong loyalty. People don't leave marriages on good terms and then volunteer for jury duty in their ex-wife's legal battles, unless they're being paid, or unless they're being forced. Karen Miller rose from the plaintiff's table, and Judge Judy's eyes tracked her like a hawk watching a field mouse. Karen was put together, almost too put together. Designer blouse, perfectly styled hair, makeup applied with the precision of someone who understood the importance of appearance. Her smile was confident, warm even, the kind of smile that said, I'm reasonable, I'm trustworthy, I'm the victim here. But Judge Judy had seen that smile before, on countless faces that turned out to be anything but trustworthy. It was rehearsed, polished, the smile of someone who'd practiced in the mirror until it looked natural. Your Honor, Karen began, her voice steady and clear. I'm here today because I've been taken advantage of once again. I hired Mr. Henderson to renovate my kitchen. I paid him $5,000 up front, and he abandoned the job halfway through, leaving me with exposed wiring, unfinished cabinets, and a sink that doesn't drain. I've brought witnesses who can attest to my character, to the fact that I'm a reasonable person who has been repeatedly victimized by dishonest contractors. Judge Judy's eyebrow arched. Repeatedly victimized. That phrase hung in the air like a red flag on a windy day. Once is bad luck, twice is unfortunate, but repeatedly? That's a pattern, and patterns tell stories. She glanced at the defendant, a middle-aged contractor named Paul Henderson, who sat slumped in his chair, exhausted and frustrated. He looked like a man who'd been dragged through hell and was now being asked to explain why he didn't enjoy the trip. Judge Judy had seen that look before too. It was the look of someone who'd done the work, played by the rules, and still ended up in her courtroom being accused of fraud. Ms. Miller, Judge Judy said, her Louisiana drawl cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Before we get to your character witnesses, I want to understand something. You said you've been repeatedly victimized by contractors. How many times are we talking about? Karen hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but Judge Judy caught it. That tiny pause, that barely perceptible moment where someone decides how much truth to tell. Well, Your Honor, over the years I've had to take legal action against a few service providers. I'm a single mother, and people see that as an opportunity to take advantage. A few, Judge Judy repeated, her tone flat. Define a few. Karen shifted her weight. Maybe 5 or 6. Your Honor, I have the documentation right here. Judge Judy held up a hand. I didn't ask for documentation. I asked for a number. Is it 5 or is it 6? Or is it more? The courtroom went quiet. Karen's smile flickered just for a moment like a candle in a sudden draft. It might be closer to 8 or 9. I'd have to check my records. Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Let me save you the trouble. I had my staff pull your litigation history this morning. You've filed 11 lawsuits in the past 15 years. 11. Against contractors, landlords, a mechanic, a dry cleaner, even a wedding planner. That's not bad luck, Ms. Miller, that's a hobby. The gallery stirred. A few whispers rippled through the room. Karen's face flushed, but she recovered quickly, her voice taking on a wounded tone. Your Honor, I understand how it looks, but I'm not litigious. I've had terrible experiences and I refuse to be taken advantage of. Judge Judy sat back, her expression unreadable. All right, Ms. Miller. Let's hear from your character witnesses. Let's start with ex-husband number 1. She looked at the bailiff. Bring him up. The first man, Michael Torres, stood and walked to the witness stand with the reluctance of a man walking to his own execution. He was in his early 40s, wearing a button-down shirt that looked freshly ironed, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Judge Judy studied him for a moment, noting the wedding ring on his left hand. A new marriage? Interesting. Mr. Torres, Judge Judy began. How long were you married to the plaintiff? 3 years, Your Honor, from 2015 to 2018, and why are you here today? Ms. Miller asked me to testify about her character. She's always been honest, organized, keeps detailed records. I thought it would help her case. Judge Judy tilted her head. You thought it would help, or she told you it would help? Michael blinked. I'm sorry. Did you volunteer to be here, Mr. Torres, or did Ms. Miller ask you to come? He hesitated. She asked me. Judge Judy nodded slowly. And when you divorced in 2018, was it amicable? Michael's jaw tightened. We had our differences, such as, we disagreed about money. Judge Judy's eyes gleamed. Money, that's vague. Did she spend too much? Did you not make enough? What kind of disagreement are we talking about? Michael glanced at Karen, then back at Judge Judy. She had a lot of expenses. Legal expenses, I assume, Judge Judy said, her voice dripping with implication, given her history. Michael said nothing, and Judge Judy let the silence sit for a moment, heavy and uncomfortable. All right, Mr. Torres, you can step down. Bring up ex-husband number 2. The second man, David Chen, took the stand with a little more composure than Michael. But Judge Judy could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed against his leg. He was polished, corporate, the kind of man who wore expensive watches and carried leather portfolios. Judge Judy skipped the pleasantries. Mr. Chen, you were married to Ms. Miller from 2011 to 2014. Why did you divorce? We wanted different things, Your Honor. That's what people say when they don't want to tell the truth, Judge Judy shot back. What did you want that she didn't, or vice versa? David shifted in his seat. It was complicated. Try me, I have all day. David sighed. She had a pattern of conflict. With service providers, contractors, people she hired, it became exhausting. Judge Judy leaned forward. Exhausting because she was always being wronged, or exhausting because she was always starting fights? David's silence was answer enough. Judge Judy waved him off. Step down. Bring up number 3. The third ex-husband, Robert Sullivan, looked like he'd been pulled off a construction site. Work boots, faded jeans, calloused hands. He sat in the witness chair like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Sullivan, Judge Judy said, you were married to Ms. Miller from 2008 to 2010. Let me guess. Money problems? Bobby nodded. Yeah, she was always suing somebody. It drained our savings, paying for lawyers, court fees. I couldn't keep up. Judge Judy nodded, her expression thoughtful. And yet here you are testifying for her. Why? Bobby looked at Karen, and for a brief moment something passed between them. Something that looked a lot like fear. She asked me to, Your Honor, and you just said yes? Out of the goodness of your heart? Bobby's voice dropped. I owed her. For what? He didn't answer. Judge Judy let him sit in the silence for a beat, then dismissed him with a flick of her wrist. All right, let's bring up ex-husband number 4. This should be enlightening. The fourth man, Thomas Grant, stood slowly, and Judge Judy noticed immediately that he was different from the others. Older, grayer, and carrying himself with a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. He sat in the witness chair and looked directly at Judge Judy, and in that moment she knew. This one's going to tell the truth, Mr. Grant, Judge Judy said, her voice softer now, almost curious. You look like you'd rather be anywhere but here. Thomas let out a long breath. You have no idea, Your Honor, but you came anyway. Why? Thomas glanced at Karen, and his expression hardened. Because if I didn't, she'd make my life hell. Again. The courtroom erupted. Karen shot to her feet, her face flushing red. Your Honor, that's not true. He's lying! Judge Judy banged her gavel once, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. Sit. Down. Ms. Miller, you'll get your turn. Right now, I want to hear what Mr. Grant has to say. And I have a feeling, she added, her eyes locking onto Thomas. It's going to be very, very interesting. Judge Judy leaned forward, her full attention on Thomas Grant. Mr. Grant, you were married to Ms. Miller from 2003 to 2007. That makes you husband number one, the original. What can you tell me about your ex-wife's character? Thomas's hands gripped the arms of the witness chair. Your Honor, Karen's a professional victim. When I met her, I thought she just had bad luck. A landlord kept her deposit. A mechanic overcharged her. A contractor did shoddy work. I felt sorry for her. I wanted to protect her, and then, Judge Judy prompted. Then I realized it was a pattern. She'd hire people, set them up to fail, then sue them, and she'd win because she was meticulous about creating evidence. Judge Judy's eyebrow arched. Creating evidence? That's an interesting choice of words. Thomas met her gaze steadily. I mean exactly what I said, Your Honor. She didn't just document things. She manufactured them. Changed timestamps, doctored emails, created fake text conversations. And I helped her do it. The courtroom exploded with gasps and whispers. Karen's face drained of color. Judge Judy banged her gavel. Order. Judge Judy's eyes never left Thomas. You helped her fabricate evidence. Why would you do that? Thomas's voice grew heavy with regret. Because I loved her, Your Honor. And because by the time I realized what she was doing, I was already complicit. If I exposed her, I'd expose myself. So I stayed quiet, helped her win cases I knew were fraudulent, and hated myself a little more each day. How many cases are we talking about? Judge Judy asked, her pen poised. 7 during our marriage. She won 3 outright, settled 4. The total? Maybe $12,000–$13,000 over 4 years. Judge Judy did the math in her head. That's over $3,000 a year. A nice supplemental income for doing nothing but lying. Thomas nodded. That's exactly what it was. A business model disguised as bad luck. And when you divorced, I told her if she ever contacted me again, I'd go to the authorities with everything I knew. Judge Judy leaned back. So why are you here, Mr. Grant? Thomas pulled out his phone. Because she threatened me, Your Honor. Judge Judy took Thomas's phone from the bailiff, her eyes scanning the screen with laser focus. The courtroom held its breath as she read, her expression growing darker with each swipe. She began reading aloud, her voice sharp and deliberate. Thomas, I need you in court next Tuesday. Just say what we practiced. Don't make me come after you. Judge Judy looked up. That's from 3 weeks ago. She kept reading. Remember what I have on you. Those fabricated documents have your fingerprints too, literally. Judge Judy paused, letting that sink in. Do this for me and we're even. Don't, and I'll make sure your new wife knows exactly what kind of man you really are. The judge set the phone down with deliberate care. Ms. Miller, this is textbook witness tampering, but I'm curious about something. She turned to the other 3 ex-husbands still sitting in the gallery. Gentlemen, did she threaten you too? The courtroom went silent. Michael Torres looked at his shoes. David Chen's fingers stopped drumming. Bobby Sullivan's jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscle twitch. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. She said she'd report me to the IRS for something from our marriage. Something that wasn't entirely legal. Judge Judy nodded slowly. Mr. Chen? David straightened his tie, a nervous habit. She has emails from when we were married. Private correspondence about my business dealings. Things that would destroy my reputation professionally if they got out. And you, Mr. Sullivan? Bobby's voice cracked. She said she'd tell my employer I was abusive during our marriage. It's a complete lie, Your Honor. But the accusation alone would cost me my job. I work with kids. One accusation and I'm done. Judge Judy sat back in her chair and for a moment she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that silenced every whisper in the room. Ms. Miller, you brought 4 ex-husbands into my courtroom. Thinking their coordinated testimony would overwhelm any scrutiny. You thought 4 voices saying the same thing would make it true. But you made one critical miscalculation. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Karen. You assumed they'd all stay scared of you forever. But fear has a breaking point and you just pushed the wrong man past his. Judge Judy pulled the case file closer, flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. The room was so quiet you could hear the rustle of paper, the hum of the overhead lights, the shallow breathing of 4 men waiting to see if their confessions would destroy them or set them free. Karen sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, her polished facade cracking like dried paint. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, lips pressed into a thin line. The confident woman who'd walked in an hour ago had vanished, replaced by someone who'd just realized the con was over. All right, Judge Judy said, closing the folder with a definitive thump. I've heard enough. Here's my ruling. She looked directly at Karen, and there was no mercy in those eyes, only cold, calculated justice. Ms. Miller, not only are you not getting the $5,000 you're asking for, I'm awarding the defendant $3,500 in court costs, legal fees and damages for the time and reputation you've cost him. But Your Honor? Karen started, her voice breaking. I said I'm not finished. Judge Judy's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Sit down and be quiet." Karen collapsed back into her chair and Judge Judy continued. "The evidence presented today shows a clear pattern of fraudulent litigation spanning over 15 years. You've weaponized the legal system, turning it into your personal ATM machine. You hire contractors, create impossible conditions, then sue when they inevitably fail to meet standards you deliberately made unattainable. The text messages, Mr. Grant's testimony, and the documented pattern of your ex-husbands all citing financial stress related to your lawsuits paint a picture that's crystal clear. You're a con artist, Ms. Miller, and not even a particularly sophisticated one." Judge Judy turned to Paul Henderson, the contractor who'd been sitting silent through the entire ordeal. "Mr. Henderson, I've reviewed your documentation. Your text messages showing Ms. Miller refused you access to complete the work. Your GPS logs proving you were at her property on the disputed dates. And the photographs of the work you did complete, all of it supports your defense. You did the job. She prevented you from finishing it so she could sue." The contractor's shoulders sagged with relief, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Your Honor. I thought I was going crazy. I've been in business for 20 years and I've never had someone manipulate me like this." "That's because most people have a conscience," Judge Judy replied. She turned back to Karen. "Ms. Miller, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of fraud, perjury, and witness tampering. What happens next is out of my hands, but I suspect you're going to become very familiar with courtrooms from a different perspective, the criminal perspective." Karen's face went pale. "Your Honor, please, I have children." "Then you should have thought about them before you built a career on lies," Judge Judy said coldly. "Maybe watching their mother face consequences will teach them something you clearly never learned. Actions have consequences." 3 weeks after the trial, the District Attorney's Office opened a formal investigation into Karen Miller's 15-year pattern of fraudulent litigation. What started as a review of one case quickly snowballed into something much larger. Subpoenas went out to every defendant Karen had ever sued, and the responses came flooding back like a dam had broken. Small business owners, contractors, service providers, all of them had stories. Stories they'd buried, losses they'd absorbed, reputations they'd struggled to rebuild. One by one they came forward, and the picture that emerged was damning. Maria Rodriguez, a landscaper from Karen's 2021 lawsuit, was among the first to respond. She sat in the DA's office, her work-worn hands folded on the table, and told her story with the quiet dignity of someone who'd carried shame for too long. "I settled for $1 in $200, she said, her voice steady but pained. "I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. The contract specified native plants, drought-resistant species, exactly what I installed. But Karen claimed she'd verbally requested roses and hydrangeas, flowers that would die in 2 weeks without constant watering. She had no proof, but fighting her would have cost more than settling. So I paid. Where did the money come from?" the assistant district attorney asked. Maria's eyes dropped. "My daughter's college fund. I took $1,200 that was supposed to pay for textbooks and gave it to a woman who lied. I've carried that shame for 3 years. Seeing Judge Judy expose her, it's like I can finally breathe again." The investigators found 8 similar cases. Defendants who'd settled not because they were guilty, but because fighting was too expensive, too risky, too exhausting. Together, Karen had extracted approximately $15,000 over 15 years. Not enough for any single victim to pursue criminal charges, but collectively, it painted a portrait of systematic fraud. Thomas Grant became the investigators' key witness. He provided the USB drive he'd kept as insurance, containing original and doctored versions of documents from 3 cases between 2004 and 2007. Forensic analysis confirmed the tampering. Metadata showed files created months after their supposed dates, images edited to add damage that hadn't existed, email headers modified to change timestamps. It was methodical, calculated, and damning. Thomas sat through hours of interviews, walking investigators through each case, explaining how he and Karen had manufactured evidence, coached witnesses, and exploited legal loopholes. "Why did you keep these files?" the investigator asked. Thomas stared at his hands, the same hands that had once helped forge documents. "Because I knew she'd never stop. I knew that one day she'd push too far, threaten the wrong person, and I wanted to be ready. I wanted proof that I was telling the truth when that day came." Turns out that day was in Judge Judy's courtroom. The other 3 ex-husbands were granted immunity in exchange for their cooperation. Michael Torres admitted Karen had blackmailed him with tax irregularities from their marriage. David Chen turned over emails showing Karen had systematically collected compromising information on him, building leverage she could use years later. Bobby Sullivan revealed that Karen had threatened to fabricate abuse allegations. Knowing his job working with children made him uniquely vulnerable to even baseless accusations. 6 months after Judge Judy's gavel came down, Karen Miller stood in a different courtroom. No cameras this time, no studio audience, just cold fluorescent lights and the weight of real consequences. She accepted a plea deal to avoid trial, 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service, and $11,500 in restitution to documented victims. The judge also designated her a vexatious litigant, meaning any future lawsuit would require a $15,000 bond and judicial pre-approval. Her days of weaponizing the legal system were over. Thomas Grant attended the sentencing. Afterward, he met with Maria Rodriguez and 3 other victims in a coffee shop near the courthouse. They didn't celebrate, just sat together in quiet solidarity. People who'd been isolated by Karen's manipulation finally finding community and shared experience. Thomas picked up the check. "It's the least I can do," he said. "I helped her hurt people. I can't undo that, but I can start making it right." Maria squeezed his hand. "You already did. You spoke up when it mattered most. The legal community took notice." The local bar association used Karen's case in ethics training, teaching young lawyers how to spot patterns of abuse. Small business organizations shared the story at conferences, emphasizing the importance of documentation and refusing to settle fraudulent claims out of fear. One contractor who'd been sued by Karen in 2019 reopened his case with Thomas's testimony, ultimately having the judgment vacated and his money returned. Judge Judy kept a printed article about the case in her desk drawer. Serial lawsuit filer exposed by 4 ex-husbands. She'd pull it out occasionally when reviewing new cases. A reminder that patterns tell stories and her job was to read them. In a later interview, she reflected on the case with characteristic bluntness. She thought bringing 4 ex-husbands would overwhelm me with credibility. Instead, she handed me 4 witnesses to her fraud. That's not strategy, that's stupidity. And stupidity in my courtroom always gets exposed. The truth doesn't just surface. Sometimes it takes one person brave enough to stop being afraid and start talking. Thomas Grant did that, and in doing so, he didn't just save himself. He saved everyone Karen would have targeted next. If this story of justice and accountability moved you, we need your support to keep producing content that exposes deception and celebrates truth. Our channel is dedicated to sharing real courtroom dramas that show how one person's courage can dismantle years of manipulation. Donations help us research cases like Karen Miller's, produce high-quality videos, and bring you the stories that remind us why integrity matters in our legal system and in our lives. Visit our website to donate today. Every contribution, no matter the size, helps us continue shining a light on justice being served. One case at a time. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth always finds a way to surface, especially when someone's brave enough to speak it. Subscribe for more incredible courtroom stories that prove courage can defeat corruption. Justice isn't just served, it's earned.